If you have received a front fence spare part replacement, you'll notice that there are a few components that go into this front fence. So, all right, so in your fence assembly, as I walk through those components, I'm going to go through these in a little bit more detail just so that you're aware of the terminology that I'm using. So we have the front fence here. We have the front sub fence. This is held in place by two pins, and then we have a spring retainer. We also have included in your replacement kit a spring, or 2 springs, and 2 spring guide blocks. These are very hard to see, but the spring is going to be inserted into the guide block like so. We've also got 2 spring guide plates. So these plates are going to hold the spring assembly into your plate. And then we've got our 2 mounting screws. To replace your fence assembly, you're going to need a few items. One, you're going to need a 2mm hex key. You're going to need a torque wrench that is set to 5 inch-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and set that now so that I do not forget. If you've got one of these Wera Torx drivers, I highly recommend them. They are very comfortable and nice. Also, I like to have a little magnetic catch tray because we do have a few parts that we need to make sure that we don't lose. Fortunately, if you're doing a drop-in replacement provided by Shaper, everything is pre-packaged, but again, I like to have this magnetic catch tray just so I can put all my parts in there. Okay, so to remove the fence, it's quite simple. There's 4 mounting screws, so we're just going to undo those 4 screws. I've already done 3 of these for the sake of time. So after we've removed our 4 screws, we're going to take out our spring retaining plates. Be careful as you're taking these out that the springs don't go flying out. Again, we did include a complete drop-in replacement, so if you do lose these springs, don't worry, there's extras in the bag, but you know, in case you don't want those trapped in your carpet or shop floor, just be mindful when you're taking these off. All right, so there's our spring plates. Next is the careful step of removing the spring and the guide block. So to do so, you can just use your 2mm hex key if it's long enough and just scoop the spring up. I like to keep my finger on top of the spring guide block again, just to keep that thing trapped so it doesn't go flying across the room when I take this out. And then we can remove the entire spring and spring guide block assembly. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. You see there, we've got our spring assembly. And then you should be able to slide, using your finger, slide the fence to the fully deployed position, and then you can simply lift it out of its channel, like so. Great. So now to replace this with the new assembly that you've received from us, you should see the part number. You've got your 2 different heat sealed bags here. You've got the main fence assembly, and then you've got this other heat sealed bag with all of the subcomponents. Again, please be careful not to lose these. They are tiny, and we do not sell them individually. So if you lose one of these, we can probably work to get you one, but just better not. So, all right. So first step is just going to be a reversal of what we did to disassemble. So we're going to take our fence assembly. We're going to drop it in. One thing to be mindful of, just want to show that here, there's a channel here at the fence, and there's a matching feature or a key here on the plate. Just make sure that when you put these in, that those are mated together properly. You should feel it snap into place when you've got it in the right position. Furthermore, when you do so, be careful when you're lining up the spring guides. We want to make sure that the forks, if you can see this, are facing towards the top of our plate. So as we drop this in, you can see that this is now in the deployed position. I should be able to rotate this back and forth freely without any issue. You're also in the fully retracted position. You should not be able to pull it out if you've got it in that keyed position correctly. So it's a nice test before going further. All right, the next step is to take our spring and our spring guide block. So we have our spring. Let's try to get this right here. And we have our little tiny guide block. We're going to insert the spring into the pin of the guide block, making the assembly. Now we're going to take this assembly and we're going to drop it into the spring guide like so. Again, being very careful not to lose your spring and have it going flying across the room. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We've got our spring assembly, dropping it into the spring guide, making sure not to lose it. Now we're going to take our spring guide plates. One thing to note here is that you will see a stamped recess. We want to make sure that the proud part of that recess is pointed up. And then you'll also notice that these are rounded on one end and sharp on the other. This should match the pocket that is milled into the CNC plate. So we will drop those in on each side. And then we will replace the 4 mounting screws. Again, these should be torqued to 5 inch-pounds. If you decide to over torque these, you'll notice that your fence deployment will feel rather stiff or sticky. So it's best to follow the guidance on the torque setting. It's also probably a good practice to every now and then go back and re-torque these and just make sure that nothing's coming loose. All right, so now that we've got that replaced, I'm going to flip it over and just check that my fence is deploying smoothly. And you can see here that it is. No issues. It is working as expected, and we'll call that a job done.